Amy from Select Travel Holidays, home of Cruise Select, and welcome to our beginner's guide to cruising. Today's presentation will be a little different from the one I usually give at our cruise shows, not least because it's virtual rather than face-to-face, but because I will be focusing on some particular key areas rather than covering some of the different styles of cruising that I usually include in my beginner's guide. This is because over the course of this virtual cruise festival, we'll be showcasing all manner of different cruise styles thanks to the fantastic range of presentations we have on offer. We've got cruise lines representing luxury cruise, expedition and different types of river cruising coming together to explain what's so different and what's so special about luxury cruises, expedition and river cruising. We also have some exciting presentations which focus on some niche cruise lines which offer something very unique, whether it's tall ship sailing or barge cruising, or even the brand new Virgin Voyages or the return of Swan Hellenic. So what I will be focusing on instead today is a nice gentle introduction to cruising for beginners, which I hope will give you enough of a taste of cruising to inspire you to find out more with our other presentations. So today I will show you why cruising is such a brilliant way to travel and give you an idea of what you can expect and bust a few cruise myths too. I will also explain a little on how cruising has changed recently and what we can expect from cruising in the future. But for a more in-depth look at how we can resume sailing safely in terms of COVID-19, which I know is obviously a big concern for a lot of people, particularly if they are considering their first cruise in the near future, then I am very pleased to say that we have a very special presentation on that with Andy Harmer from Clear on cruising post-COVID. So that's probably enough of what I'm going to talk about in my presentation, but perhaps you're wondering who I am and why I'm giving a beginner's guide to cruising. Well, you probably noticed that I'm Amy and I've been cruising for over 20 years and since my first cruise back in '99 I've experienced about 60 ships from about 40 different cruise lines, both on the oceans and the rivers. I'm the only travel professional in Bedfordshire to be accredited as a Clear Cruise Master, and last year I was shortlisted for both the Travel Agent Marketing Star and the Travel Agent Rising Star Under 35's award at the Cruise Star Awards, but held by Cruise Train News, so hopefully you can see that you're in capable hands with me. Of course, I am just one part of Team Select, which also includes Sharon and Bella, as well as my mum Rachel, who between them all have well over a century of cruising and travel experience, with each working in the travel industry since the early 80s or the mid to late 70s. Behind the scenes, Kerry is my fellow marketeer and little Rachel, or Rachel Smith, is our lovely admin lady. You can usually find us in our shop on Mill Street in Bedford, although obviously during this year's lockdowns we've been working from home. So why go on a cruise holiday? Well, to be honest, I expect you're already tempted, otherwise you wouldn't be watching our virtual cruise festival. Perhaps you have friends and family who have been on a cruise and you saw their amazing photos on social media, or they came back and told you all about the friendly crew, the amazing food and the excursions they enjoyed. Those were enough to convert me to cruising, especially the food, on my first cruise as a child over 20 years ago. I loved the fact that there was a different port of call each day rather than staying in the same place all the time, and we were completely spoiled by the crew. I also quite enjoyed the dressing up at night, which is something I still enjoy to this day, although dress codes have become much more relaxed since then. But we'll take a look at what's changed in cruising in a bit. For many people, the ability to see a number of destinations in one holiday but only unpacking once is an obvious advantage and a big draw. For some destinations, a cruise is the best or even only way to visit. Places such as Alaska and off-the-grid destinations such as Antarctica. As you'll see in many of the presentations over this virtual cruise festival, cruising is all about the destination, with some cruise lines priding themselves on being able to reach further into the heart and centre of towns and cities, and others spending a longer time in port for you to really explore. Modern cruising has obviously seen incredible advances in technology and more amenities on board, and I'm sure you've perhaps seen those mega ships with water slides and arcades, and perhaps feel that cruising is like giant resorts at sea. This is the case to a large extent for some cruise lines that we work with, and they are typically great for families, for keeping everyone entertained. But you won't find any of those at this virtual cruise festival because, like our annual cruise shows, we are aiming to showcase perhaps some lesser known cruise lines, and we've always found that the majority of our clients do have a tendency to prefer the smaller ships, and I must admit it is my personal preference to go on a smaller ship too. So while there are some ships with all sorts of mod cons on board, from racetracks to rock climbing, you'll also discover that for many of the cruise lines at our virtual cruise festival, the destinations are as important, if not more so, than the ship itself. This is especially true of expedition cruising. However, there is never any compromising on comfort or service with any of our cruise lines. So we've got destinations. I've also mentioned that ships themselves boast a whole array of amenities to keep you busy. Even though our ships at our virtual cruise festival don't have the aforementioned water slides or arcades, they do still offer a wide range of choices on board, from dining venues, bars and lounges to relax in and get to know your fellow guests over a cocktail, as well as spa and wellness facilities to rejuvenate yourself or keep active, and even enrichment activities such as onboard lectures. So we have a wide range of destinations and an equally wide range of activities to enjoy on board, as well as your breakfast, lunch and dinner, perhaps even an afternoon tea or a midnight buffet if you've got room, all included. There's a lot packaged up in a cruise that makes it great value for money. And that's another reason to go on a cruise holiday. It's not just a comfortable and seamless way to travel and visit places, it's great value too. And you can find a cruise to suit your budget, as there are so many different options available. There are cruise lines that include more in their cruise fare, such as all-inclusive drinks, gratuities, excursions, even Wi-Fi, etc. And there are cruise lines that offer, for example, drinks packages, so that you can have the option to prepay for your drinks, or other bundles that can be personalised to your interests and your needs. It's a bit like buying a bundle for your satellite TV or a mobile phone. You might be interested in the sports or film packages, but you don't want the documentaries, or maybe you need more data and fewer phone minutes for your phone. Similar bundles can be found for cruising. Plus, there are different cabin categories on each ship which vary in price. So perhaps if you are more budget conscious, you want to spend more on the actual cruise experience itself, you'd opt for the lead-in cabin, often in an inside, rather than spend more on, for example, a balcony cabin. However, at Cruise Select, we will always make sure that you get the best value for your money. So with the absolute joy of waking up in a new port of call each day without needing to unpack, discovering gorgeous destinations either under your own steam or on a ship's excursion, which can offer some great unique experiences and a deeper insight into the places you're visiting, relaxing, being entertained on board, and all for great value for money. It's no wonder that so many people fall in love once they get on board, and 9 out of 10 first-time cruisers will book their second cruise within 12 months. So allow me to share a video clip of me, Rachel and Sharon talking about our first ever cruise experiences. We have each cruised countless times since, and many years later continue to be passionate about cruising.
Okay, my first cruise was actually a river cruise on the Rhine. I was only 18 months old. I did sport a very nice pudding basin haircut, so I'm not prepared to show the photographs. Apparently, I liked looking at all the books in the library, and I got spoilt rotten by the crew on board.
My first cruise memory, I was a mere 17 years old, and I went away on a P&O cruise for 2 weeks to the Greek islands. My first few days, unfortunately, I was in my cabin feeling rather seasick. Once I'd got used to the sea legs, I then thoroughly enjoyed the experience.
Some years later, I think I was about 14, and I was very lucky to go on a school trip, which some people I know go on the cruises, and it was back on the SS Uganda. Did the pyramids, did Egypt and Israel, so that was lovely, but of course we were in a big dormitory.
Well, I've been cruising 20 years now actually. I obviously started young. It was a family cruise with my parents, my brother and my nan and granddad, and obviously it's quite long ago for me, but I do remember a few things. I remember like absolutely loving the amount of food that was available, and particularly my first Baked Alaska parade, which was something really special. And I remember a little bit after we got back, we always used to go for Sunday lunch around my nan's, and I think probably the first Sunday lunch we had back after we got back from holiday, she did her own Baked Alaska and her own little Baked Alaska parade, which I actually remember. It was a bit like, it felt like we were sort of extending the cruising experience, which was nice.
Visited many amazing places, went to Athens, up the Acropolis. Truly wonderful memories made on board. Friends, dining experience was wonderful, had a lovely cabin, and all in all staff were excellent. And I'm pleased to say I survived the remainder of the days feeling very well.
I also just loved the fact that we were seeing different things each day. I remember we went to, we did a tour of Pompeii, and just seeing those, bodies that were just preserved by the ash was incredible. And I think since then I've just been converted to cruising, largely because of the food and the fact that you get to see so many different places all on one holiday, which I think is a big plus for almost all cruises really.
Some years later, I won my first ever competition, although being in travel for many years, and I won a cruise for a week in the Med back in 1998, or it could have been 97. I got home still excited about winning and couldn't really believe it, and said to my husband, "Oh, we're going on a week's cruise." And his reply to me was, "Find somebody else, I can't think of anything worse." Anyway, persuaded him, and we did go. Within the first 12 hours he said, "This is it, love it, we're bringing the children next time," which we did a year later. And I suppose that really got me into cruising. It was, as I say, when cruising was very much in its infantry, so to speak, and yeah, I've loved it ever since.
Those people out there that are sceptical about cruising and have never cruised before, I would say definitely give it a go.
So what can you expect on a cruise? Well, hopefully I'll give you some ideas, and certainly our presentations should also help too. In all honesty, this will vary depending on which cruise line you choose or even which destination. There really is no one size fits all to cruising. However, perhaps let's take a look at some of the misconceptions or cruise myths, and you might find that cruising is a bit different to what you did expect. So sometimes I ask people what their stereotypical cruiser is, and often I'll get a mixture of responses, but what tends to come out most prominently is that cruising is for the rich and or for the very old. This was certainly the traditional cruise stereotype, but I think it has been holding less traction over recent years, although a recent survey did find that 66% of non-cruisers thought cruising was too expensive. Well, I hope that, as I've already discussed, how cruising represents great value for money, how there is a cruise line to suit each budget, and how we can help you to make sure that you get the best value for your money. I hope that perhaps you've seen that actually it's not just for the rich and the elite, and actually what you might find is that on a per day basis, research has shown that cruising can often work out cheaper than on a land-based holiday. Mm. As regards to the stereotype that cruising is for the very old, which sounds a bit rude saying it like that, but I think also what we could see is that cruising is ideal for all ages, partly fueled by the growth in family cruising on board the likes of Norwegian Cruise Lines, Royal Caribbean and MSC, whose mega ships feature more and more family-friendly facilities to keep the whole family entertained and occupied, whether it's dodgems at sea, go-kart track, rock climbing, or incredible, almost gravity-defying water slides, as well as Broadway at sea. So although we're not featuring any mega ships during this virtual cruise festival, it would be remiss not to mention them because, like I say, they have had a massive influence on cruising. The options are available, and especially for families. And if you would like to find out more about these cruise lines or similar, we can still help you. So over the last few years, the average age of UK cruise passengers has remained largely unchanged at 56, 57, but this is an age still below retirement. Although actually internationally the average cruiser is younger still at only 46, which is in fact the lowest average age for 20 years. So I think we can see that it's cruising, like I say, it feels a little bit rude sort of talking about this sort of elderly stereotype. But yes, I do remember there used to be comments about, blue rinses and such. Now, all age groups saw an increase in choosing cruises in 2018, including more bookings from people in their 20s or 30s. However, with the time and money and an increasingly adventurous spirit, those aged over 60 represented the largest growth in cruise bookings overall, but especially for expedition cruising, as they look to travel widely, comfortably and with purpose, as Clear UK put it in the Ocean Cruise Review 2018. So here we can see that not only is cruise resonating across all age ranges, but also our own perceptions of what can be considered elderly is changing, with people remaining fitter and more healthy and active for longer than before. So again, the idea of an average or typical cruiser is getting weaker as the amount of choice in terms of destinations as well as styles of cruising increases, widening the appeal. So many cruise lines offer experiences to appeal to both young and old, including a balance of excursions that are more active or adventurous with those that are perhaps more sedate or traditional, such as a panoramic coach tour. I guess you could always just say that age is just a mindset. Now, we do have a special presentation with Virgin Voyages, who launched their first ship, the Scarlet Lady, earlier this year. And it will be interesting to see whether this brand new cruise line will play a part in further changing the demographics or stereotyping of cruising, because they really are offering something quite different to your usual cruising. I think it's fair to say they threw out the cruise rule book. They already have strong brand awareness, and they have some bold plans for adult-only cruising with what they call a unique Virgin twist on everything on board Scarlet Lady. So they're hoping to appeal to non-cruisers, and you could also say that it might appeal to perhaps a slightly younger demographic than the current average age of cruisers. But I'd definitely say watch this space. Now, of course, sometimes when speaking to new to cruisers, we often get asked about seasickness. We saw that Sharon was stuck in her cabin, bless her, for a few days on her first cruise before getting her sea legs. And she's not the only one from Team Select. I have some sympathy with this concern because I've also been a sufferer. I've been prone to travel sickness on virtually all forms of transportation since I was a child, although luckily it has generally eased a lot since I've grown older. However, the comparisons non-cruisers make with ferries is unfair and not reflective of a cruise experience, particularly with continuing advances in technology for cruising. And there's also, I'd say, an important distinction to make in a ferry's purpose as a means of transportation between A to B, for shorter distances versus a cruise ship's purpose as a style of holiday. So comfort is obviously going to be of greater importance and consideration when cruising. So to assume that because you've chucked up over the side of a ferry into the English Channel means that you will be seasick on a cruise ship isn't necessarily going to be a correct assumption, so fear not unnecessarily. Furthermore though, if you are concerned about passage over notorious stretches of sea, for example the English Channel, the Irish Sea, the Bay of Biscay or the North Sea, to name just a few, it is possible to choose alternative itineraries such as perhaps a fly cruise rather than a cruise out of the UK, so you'll be bypassing some of the dodgier bits of sea. And there are also itineraries which hug the coastline and spend more time in port, less time cruising, which are preferable if you are concerned about seasickness. Now, personal tip here from my own personal experience, those wristbands which are supposed to help prevent seasickness are useless, and to add insult to injury are not only hideous but nigh on impossible to coordinate with outfits. So during perhaps one of my worst bouts of seasickness, it was so bad I missed Italian night, I had to have an injection from the ship's doctor, which sorted it out, which is good news. But this was a worst case scenario which has only occurred to me once in over 20 years of cruising, so I hope that reassures you. And other than missing out on my beloved carbs once, I've never let seasickness prevent me from having great time on a cruise, and I'm sure you won't either. Now perhaps this is a similar fear to the fear of seasickness, but we've even heard some people say that they wouldn't want to be stuck out at sea with nothing to do. Now itineraries vary massively and days at sea will largely depend on that, for example. So if you're cruising from Southampton for a Mediterranean cruise, that will entail more days at sea than flying straight to Barcelona or any other embarkation port. And a transatlantic voyage is largely about the journey rather than the destination, so ports of call are few and far between. Now of course this will be down to personal taste, and for many people days at sea are a chance to relax and enjoy ship's facilities. However, whichever itinerary you pick, you wouldn't be stuck at sea with nothing to do. Put simply, you can do as much or as little as you like. As I mentioned earlier, nowadays ships are packed full of activities and facilities, and the bigger the ship, the more choices you have. But that doesn't mean that there aren't options available on a smaller ship, as we will discover during our presentations of cruise lines. And of course, it's worth mentioning at this point that seasickness or being stuck at sea with nothing to do is certainly not an issue on river cruising. Even during sailing on a river ship, one of the attractions is simply relaxing and watching the passing scenery. But you will also find that there will likely be the option of an onboard activity or two to join in on. Often these activities will give you an enhanced understanding of the destinations and the cultures that you'll be experiencing and visiting. Now let's take a look at a couple of the daily programmes from my grandparents' cruise on board the iconic Queen Elizabeth in the early 1960s. I'm not entirely sure why Cunard decided to use cheesy pirate cartoons on their daily programmes, but we've got a hat parade, deck sports, gala dances, tea music and cocktail dances, organ recitals and music available to listen to at quite regimented times. On the next day, there's actually apparently children on board, but otherwise you've got your deck sports, a bit more dancing and organ recitals, but alas, no hat parade. However, many ships nowadays boast West End style shows and enrichment programmes, so you can learn new skills like learning to dance, join a cookery class, or attend a guest lecture by renowned experts in their field. You can of course relax as much as you like by the pool, in the library, at the spa or in the bar, where you might tend to find me. With many ships offering all of these. Cruise lines are investing increasing amounts of money on their onboard enrichment or entertainment programs, and this is one of the changes I've seen throughout my time cruising. Now some cruises may have a theme, such as a wine theme, that's always popular, or a focus on a period of history. and they'll have experts in these fields on board to present lectures and specially themed excursions. You'll find a lot of theme cruises on river ships in particular. There's also lots of destination-rich itineraries on offer, and cruise lines are looking more and more at immersing their guests in the local destinations, whether it's with a longer stay in port or a wider range of interesting excursions on offer. So either way, you'll find that there's plenty to do on a cruise. Now, our final cruise myth is that cruising is too stuffy or formal, and I think this might be related in part to the perceptions of cruising being exclusively for the wealthy and or elderly, but like those myths, as I hope we've seen, it is not reflective of the reality of cruising. So traditionally, cruise ships had quite strict dress codes, particularly for formal night. And if you're wondering what formal night is, then it's the night that the men wear the, the dinner suits, and the women wear the beautiful long dresses. The captain might, we usually sort of like captain's cocktails, etc. It's, I guess, really it's like quite a glitzy sort of night. So that's your formal night. Sometimes you could have it 2 to 3 occasions on a 14-night cruise, depending. But of course, whether it's formal night or not, traditionally you'd have set dining times. So you'd have first sitting usually about 6:15ish, and second sitting about 8:30, and these would be at a set table where you'd sit each night. There are of course advantages to this, so the same waiter would serve you daily and he'd get to know you, and more importantly your likes and dislikes, and this can be quite congenial if you're sociable enough, as you could get to know the people around you. So that was the traditional sort of seating, and it's still applicable on some cruise lines. However, over the last 10-15 years or so, cruise lines have actually they've been moving away from these stuffy formalities, and it's become a lot more flexible. I think as it's become more popular, and there's cruise lines to cater for people who want a more relaxed, more informal experience, and others that still want to adhere a little bit more to the old traditions. Now, you don't have to dress up in formal dress. Dress codes have loosened quite a lot, with some cruise lines opting for a country club atmosphere and formal night as an option only. Some have even completely abolished formal night. Dining has also become more open, partly because ships nowadays have a number of different dining venues on offer, so it's become a lot less set and rigid. And even in the main restaurant on board, you might find open dining rather than set dining times and places, allowing people greater flexibility. River and expedition cruises are becoming increasingly popular too, and these both offer a more relaxed atmosphere on board. Expedition cruising in particular couldn't be accused of being stuffy and formal. I think part of this is partly due to, as I've discussed, cruise lines are becoming, they're really focusing more and more on what they can offer in terms of immersing you in your destination. So if you've been on an excursion, or perhaps just want to spend a bit more time in port, you'll want to be relaxed. You won't want to be rushing back to, get all dolled up for a set time. It's your holiday at the end of the day. So I think a lot of that is why we now have more flexibility with, cruising in the evenings, dress codes, dining, etc. So, that said, there are still of course cruise lines that offer set dining, as well as keeping the tradition of formal night alive. You might also find that some cruise lines will offer a choice of set dining or open dining, allocated to different areas of the main restaurant. Now, for some cruisers, of course, the chance to dress up remains a highlight, and as you can tell, I'm personally quite happy to overdress rather than underdress. But cruising is, I think it's fair to say, no longer as stuffy and formal as once it might have been. And actually, I must say, I honestly think that this particular preconception of cruise being really stuffy from people who have never cruised in their lives is one of my pet hates. So I hope we've put that to rest now. So hopefully, as you might have begun to realise, there's a lot of diversity in cruising nowadays. The cruise industry prides itself on saying that there is a cruise ship out there for everyone. Ships are not cookie cutter, they come in all shapes and sizes, and life on board has rich and varied offerings. How life is on board will vary between cruise line, and so picking the right ship is of course imperative. But luckily our girls are as experienced and knowledgeable as they are friendly, and are experts at picking the right ship and the right itinerary to suit you. And that's just a start. We pride ourselves on our customer service too, so we'll ensure that everything is taken care of for you, leaving you to do nothing but look forward and enjoy your cruise. The cruise industry has always been great at adapting throughout its long history. It's had earlier golden eras when it was seen as glamorous and exclusive, and it's seen its popularity wane in favour of the greater convenience and speed of air travel, but it bounced back. What happened was it asserted itself as a form of holiday in its own right, rather than a means of going from A to B in comfort. So the growth of cruising over the last 15, 20 or more particularly I'd say perhaps the last 10 years has been incredible. And it's certainly shown how successful cruising has been at proving itself to be a holiday in its own right. This popularity shows no abatement, and cruising's been steadily adapting to meet the demands of its ever-discerning passengers, with increasing focuses on experiences both on board and ashore, particularly offering authentic local experiences, as well as we've seen more recent emphases on wellness and keeping active. Gyms and spas have long been a long-term feature on cruise ships. Not that you would ever tend to find me very often in the gym, but I have been reliably informed over the years that yes, there is a gym somewhere on board. It's just not in the direction that I'm walking in generally. But several cruise lines have really started to capitalise on the wellness trend. So it could be something as simple as daily complimentary yoga classes, as well as the introduction of wellness hosts who host fitness classes and lectures to programmes created in partnership with wellness leaders. It's only right that people are paying more attention to environmental issues, and this is another of the big changes we've seen over cruising. And as individuals are looking at how they can mitigate the impact they have on the planet, so are cruise lines. In December 2018, Clear, which I know I've mentioned a few times already, but they are, if you're wondering, the Cruise Lines International Association, announced that the global cruise industry was committed to reduce the rate of carbon emissions by 40% across the industry fleet by 2030. This commitment is unique across the whole maritime industry, and I think it showcases the seriousness in which cruising is taking its environmental and sustainability and responsibilities. So for cruise lines, the issues of sustainability and climate change are as significant as they are for individuals. After all, cruising relies heavily on the beauty of the oceans and the seas and the preservations of harbours and seaside communities. And as such, cruise lines have heavily invested time and resources and energy into ensuring this. So there's so many different methods they're adopting to improve their sustainability, and you can learn more about some of these different methods in our cruise panels or during some of the cruise line presentations. And I think it's fair to say it is apparent that the cruise industry, which in itself only actually represents 1% of the global shipping industry, is striving to ensure sustainability and investing heavily in protecting the environment. This is actually, I'm sure you can probably tell, something that I'm quite passionate and interested in, and I think part of that is because I feel that cruising has had a bit of a, it does get scapegoated quite a lot, quite easily, and the environment concerns is perhaps one that I think it does get scapegoated at quite a lot, and hopefully you could see that that there is a lot to be positive about. There's a lot to sort of shout out about in favour of the measures cruising is taking to mitigate its impact on the environment, and so we can enjoy to continue cruising. Obviously this year cruise lines have had to deal with the challenges of a new pandemic, the coronavirus, and cruising was voluntarily suspended in March, although a few have resumed some sailings in a limited capacity since the summer. COVID-19 and the measures expected to be put in place on board ships when they resume sailing will be discussed in practically all of our presentations and panels, although it is an ever-changing situation, but you can always rest assured that Team Select will give you the latest advice. So we're seeing a lot of some of the changes cruising has experienced over the last 20 years and arguably longer, and we've seen how cruising appeals to people of all ages, how it's a great value as a holiday, there's tons to do on board or ashore, and that life on board isn't as stuffy as people might think. During our virtual cruise festival, we'll be joined by a number of some of our favourite cruise lines, but not so many of them are household names. We sell all manner of cruise lines, from mainstream to niche, and we've aimed to showcase the diversity of cruising for you here today. If you ask the average member of the British public to name some cruise lines, they'll most likely reel off the likes of P&O, Cunard, Royal Caribbean, possibly also Fred Olsen, who incidentally do have a very special presentation available exclusively for those who registered for the festival. However, they might not be able to, they might not have heard of Hebridean or heard of Gruton, and they might not realise that Intrepid, if they have heard of them, have some fantastic marine products, and it might not be abundantly clear what the difference is between all of these cruise lines. So we have put together presentations from river cruises, expedition, luxury cruise lines, small ships and so much more here. The ships represented throughout this festival range from just 6 passengers to around 2,000 to 2,500 at maximum capacity. I hope that this beginner's guide to cruising has given you a brief introduction and a better idea of what to expect on a cruise, why you should give cruising a try, and hopefully also bust a few cruise myths too. However, if you do want to find out more about cruising, you can always speak to any of us at Team Select by calling 01234 326 758 or emailing sales@cruiseselect.co.uk, and we will be happy to help. Thank you for taking the time to join my beginner's guide to cruising. I hope you found it useful, but if you do have any further queries, please don't hesitate to contact me or the rest of the team, and I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the virtual cruise festival.